We'd just like for you to share your personal experiences, knowledge on the topic before going further.
My heritage is a Baptist heritage, an evangelical heritage, and I didn't really have in my experience and in the literature that I read as a young minister and even as a mature minister a lot about contemplative prayer in general and Lectio in particular. And the idea of contemplative prayer is listening to God, listening at a deep level. And Lectio is one of those practices that helps us listen. It's also centered in Scripture. And it combines a kind of cataphatic and apophatic approach, that is with senses and images, and then a kind of listening that transcends even words and images. Mm-hmm. For me, the practice has been start with Lectio, reading Scripture, and then moving to meditatio, which is meditating on Scripture, and then moving to oratorio, which is speaking back to God what you're hearing at a deep level, discerning, experiencing, feeling. And then contemplatio, simply being still and being present without any of the above, just being present to God. And that it doesn't have to be in that order, but the idea of reading, and if you don't like to use the Latin words, the idea of reading and reflecting and responding and then resting. And that's been very meaningful to me. If you take, say, a 20-minute period and you take 5 minutes to read Scripture, maybe read it several times, read a parable, read a verse, read a part of the Scripture, you read it, and then you take some moments to just meditate on it, think about it, reflect on its meaning, ask questions of it. Let the text speak to you about not so much to become a scholar on this text, but to listen at a meditative level of what God might be saying to you, to me. And then maybe pray about it. You talk to God. You talk either openly or silently about something that you've heard or something that's on your mind. Maybe you even journal during that time. And then a period of just absolute stillness in which you're just present with the text and with the Spirit that speaks to you and is present with you in the text. So that very simple little practice, but it's a very good framework that's been helpful to me. I don't use it every day, right, but it has been a practice that I've used on occasions. That's sort of the practice as it's been something in my life.
I've seen you use this practice in the classroom setting.
Yes.
And I've seen how effective it's been.
Yes.
How could it be used, or can it be used in the ministry setting?
In a local church or in a small group? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be used. You could do just what we talked about, that little rubric, a little framework. You could do that with a small group. You could say, okay, together we're going to hear the text. Maybe at that point, instead of everybody reading it, maybe one person reads the text, and everybody sits and listens as it's read.
Right.
Maybe it's read 2 or 3 times, and then you take a few moments. Let's just meditate on it, and then in terms of speaking back to God, you could either have this time of speaking back to God done silently, or you could do it orally. You could have a group of people respond. Something that spoke to them, something that jumped out at them, that moved them. They could pray out loud. And then you would sit again in a time of silence, simply present to the text.
Okay. How can Lectio be approached when dealing with difficult passages of Scripture or maybe a difficult text?
Yeah, well, I think I would say that there's no substitute. Lectio does not substitute for good hard study.
Right.
I mean, Lectio Divina is one way of reading Scripture and listening to Scripture. It's not the only way. And so I would say that don't let this substitute for just good hard analytical Bible study. But it can also be a time to listen to Scripture that might be very difficult to interpret, but ask the question, what is the Spirit saying to me in this very difficult text? Not so much maybe what it meant in that context,
Right.
all of the historical critical ramifications or implications, but what can and what does the Spirit say to me in my life through this? Again, I want to say that Lectio is not the only way to read Scripture, and it should not be done at the exclusion of good hard Bible study and good
Right.
hard critical historical methodology.
Mhm.